Well guys, I got a really exciting video for you today. If you're one of my subscribers, then you probably already know that I like to do mods and upgrades on my truck here and also my RV. And every once in a while I come across one of those mods where you're not spending a lot, but you're getting a lot in return, a lot of bang for your buck, so to speak. And this is one of those mods. For under $250, I added a subwoofer to my truck. And guys, just as a reminder, this is my SLE trim level truck. It's a 2024 GMC Sierra 2500 HD. And so with the SLE trim level that I got here, it just has the basic audio system, 6 speakers, one in each of the doors, and then a tweeter on either side up in the dash there. So it is not the upgraded Bose system that has a subwoofer that typically comes, SLT and above. Now I'm going to give you all the details on this mod, everything from how I wired it to some things that I learned along the way. And then at the very end, I'm going to share something that I would do differently if I was doing it all over again. So definitely stay tuned until the end. Okay, so to kick things off, let me answer the question first. Why add a subwoofer to your truck in the first place, right? I mean, if you're looking for that loud thumping bass where you hear it in the truck, your neighbor hears it, everybody else as you're driving down the road hears that subwoofer. Well, this is not going to do that. Really my goals here were to add to the existing factory sound system, kind of fill in that lower end, the lower frequencies, and basically just make everything sound richer and fuller, especially as I'm listening to my great 80s music, I'd be able to hear the bass line. And so really that's why I wanted to add this subwoofer to my truck, to just fill in that lower end, those lower frequencies, and make everything sound fuller and richer. I mean, if you are regularly driving around listening to your audio past the 75% limit on the volume scale, nothing wrong with that, by the way, I don't know that this is really going to satisfy your craving for bass. But if you're like me and you're listening to, 25, 50% volume range most of the time with the music, that's where I think this really helps fill in the sound system. And guys, part of the reason why I waited so long to do this mod, I've owned this truck for over 1.5 years now, but part of the reason I waited so long is I just assumed that adding something like this would be very intrusive and would involve a lot of, pulling panels off and just a lot of effort and time. And surprisingly, it's really not that bad. There's really only 2 panels down here to remove. You've got your fuse panel right here. And I mean, everything is right here on the passenger side. So I spent a lot of time researching to get all the, wires, the right colors identified. And I'm going to share all that in just a minute. But really, this mod is pretty straightforward. And so I'm going to show you all that information. Now, full disclaimer, guys, do your own research. There's a lot of different options within even a trim level like mine. And so what I'm showing you and what you're seeing may not be exactly what you find on your truck. And so you just want to do your own research, verify everything that I'm showing you right here. But with that disclaimer, let me cut to the install footage that I recorded about a month earlier, just showing you from start to finish how I did everything. Okay, so to start, we've got to get 12 volt power here in the engine bay from the battery. We've got our fancy distribution block right here. And this might look a little bit different depending on the options on your truck. But basically, we've got different choices where we can tap off of. On mine, I happen to have an open 80. These are fuses right here, so I've got an 80 that's open and 100, and I opted to go for the 80. And so this is my 12 volt power coming off of the battery, and it kind of snakes all the way down here. Basically, they have a spot already provisioned by GM to get through the firewall, and it was actually pretty easy. I just went from the passenger side and poked through right there with the fish tape and then pulled that wire through. From the passenger side front door, I'll give you a better angle up here for where that 12 volt power comes from. You can see that blue cable right there, and it goes into that little rubber grommet, and that goes directly into the engine bay. So I just put my fish tape right there and then pulled the cable back through. And so that is the 12 volt positive. And then to get access to everything else, you really only need to remove 3 panels. And so I've got them loosely attached right here. This is going to be for your fuses. And then right down here, we have this single piece that goes all the way up here And these just have clips, and so you just gently pull them off. Actually do this one right here first on the seat, because this one has, you can see, teeth that kind of fit down into the one on the floor there on the sill. But then basically these just gently pull up, and you're going to keep pulling up all the way, and then you kind of pull this way to get the rest of it out. And when you do that, it's going to reveal everything else that you need to get access to with the wires. So again, just really 3 panels, not too bad. And so this is what it looks like when everything's opened up. And basically you can trace that 12 volt positive cable. You can see it comes up there from the engine bay, and then it runs down through here, and it's got this nice kind of channel to protect all the cables, and then goes back to the amp right there. Then as far as the ground, you've got these nice grounding points that are already supplied by GM. There was one already right here and then one above it, so I chose to use the one above it right there. And don't be confused, because my ground cable is the same color as my 12 volt positive, but that is my grounding cable right there. So we've got a real nice ground, and of course that's going to follow the 12 volt positive back. And then this skinnier blue cable right here is the remote turn on that basically takes 12 volt power when the engine is on, or the accessory is on the vehicle, and tells the amplifier essentially to turn on. And so that 12 volt remote turn on wire runs up here into the passenger side fuse compartment. And then I opted to use one of these piggyback fuse adapters right here. You can see here on my fuse panel that is F26, and that is a 10 amp SEO USB charge. So that's what I'm using right there for remote turn on. And then the only remaining connections to make are the actual speaker wire. To get the actual speaker signal, I opted to use the rear, not the front speaker signal, but the rear left and right. Fortunately, all of those wires are tucked up all the way in this compartment, kind of directly behind the glove box. I'll see if I can get you a nice close-up here. So you're looking at the outside wall of the passenger side of the truck, and you can see there's an aluminum box up there with some fins on it, and that basically goes to the infotainment system, and it's got 2 harnesses, 2 connectors on it, a black and a gray. And if you pull those down, it has all the wires for basically all the speakers in the truck. So again, I opted to use the rear left and right speakers, so you've got a positive and negative for each, 4 total. And you can get a nice, neat, clean harness that basically interrupts those 2, so you don't have to make any modifications to the wires if you want, and I'll put a link to all that down below. But I opted just to use T-taps. And so that's what those blue connectors are right there. And I basically just intercepted those 4 wires that feed the rear speakers, left and right, positive, negative, and connected those to my speaker wire. And that's this thick black wire that you're seeing right there in the foreground. And so those are my speaker connections, and then basically fed those 2 wires through this same channel, kind of opposite the side where the power and the ground are running. And then again, you can see they exit right here and go up under the passenger side seat. And then from the rear, you're looking at directly behind the passenger front seat right here. I've got everything laid out so you can see how those connections are made. But those same speaker wires come up from the side right here. And then it goes into an LOC, a line output converter. And this is one mistake I made initially. I thought I would just take the high-level speaker input and go directly into the amp. And oftentimes you can do that with these active subwoofers, and then the subwoofer will convert all that down to line level. But when I did that, I got a lot of noise. It could just be the quality of the one that's built into this particular subwoofer. In previous cars that I've done this to, I had no issues and didn't need to use one of these, but I got a lot of noise. Long story short, after a lot of troubleshooting, it wasn't a grounding issue or something like that. It was just noise. And so really one of these LOCs worked best to take that speaker level, drop it down to an RCA level, and then go RCA into the amp. And so basically you're just taking the left and right. the positive and negative, mirroring it up to the designated wires right there. And then of course these thicker gauge wires are the 12 volt positive in the ground, along with the remote turn on that go directly into the harness to the amplifier to supply the power. This one also has a little remote attached to it, so that's what that thin kind of flat cable is, to control and adjust the bass level. So overall, I mean, everything was pretty easy to get to. I mean, once you get these panels off on the passenger side, everything's going to be run right along here. And so it's pretty accessible. I think the part that took me the longest was just researching, you know, what color wires for the speaker taps to tap into to make sure I got the right ones for the rear. But really, other than that, it was just, you know, taking my time, making sure everything's nice and clean and, you know, tucked into this sill right here and protected. And then basically it's just putting all those pieces back, all the trim pieces back, and it's all set. Okay, so that is how I wired everything. Again, guys, do your own research just to make sure that your truck is the same. Let me show you last, though, how I actually mounted the subwoofer right here. I did something that I guess was a little bit unconventional. You know, I did not want to put any holes in the floorboard of my truck when mounting the subwoofer. And so what I did is I basically just secured it by running through this kind of monolithic floor mat that I ordered with my truck. And so you can see right here, I've got a bolt running through from underneath the mat actually here with a fender washer, and then just a nut on top. And same thing on the back, actually went through the carpet on the one that's further underneath the passenger seat right there. And I mean, this thing is more than rock solid in the back of the truck. It's not going anywhere. And that way I haven't really drilled any holes or done anything permanent, you know, into the truck itself. I'll also touch real quickly on why I chose the passenger seat, under the passenger seat, as the location, as opposed to pushing it back further here. You know, a lot of folks will put the subwoofer underneath the rear passenger seat. I actually have some special plans here that I want to do with storage-wise, and so I wanted to leave all that unhindered and wide open, and that's why I chose to put it under the front passenger seat. And really, you're not losing any legroom. I've got the front seat pushed forward just a little bit right here, and of course you have tons of legroom in the back of the cab here, but it doesn't impair the legroom. And so I really like this location a lot. It sounds great. And I'm just really pleased with how everything turned out. Okay, guys, so those are all the install details. Let me talk about why I specifically chose the Pioneer compact subwoofer here. I mean, by the way, the install details that I showed you, really all of that's going to be the same regardless of which brand of subwoofer you choose. I mean, you could even get, you know, GM has a Kicker branded subwoofer that's really designed for under the back passenger seat right here, and it's got a custom molded shroud. And you could even do that subwoofer. It's quite a bit larger, so it's going to produce more bass. It's more expensive, obviously, but the install is going to be pretty similar as far as running the wires to feed that particular subwoofer. So why the Pioneer subwoofer right here? I mean, there's a lot of great choices out there. If you're not a Pioneer fan, I'll put down below some other alternatives that I looked at before I finalized my selection on the Pioneer here. But I mean, basically I went with the Pioneer here because of its compact size and just how affordable it is. I mean, at only $200, I think it's really just a bargain for the amount of bass and just the fullness that I'm getting out of it. Now the Pioneer, it comes with all the basic install wires, although I gotta confess, I did end up running my own wires, mainly because I had some spare, you know, heavier gauge amp wiring left over from a previous project. And really, in my opinion, the supplied wires that came with the Pioneer, they just seemed a little bit on the thin side, just my opinion. So that's why I used some different wires to feed everything. But back to why I chose the Pioneer, really it was the price that drew me initially. And guys, I gotta confess, I was not expecting a lot in terms of the fullness of the bass coming out of here, because after all, the woofer itself, it's only about 8 inches by 5 inside of the enclosure here, and then it's only 170 watts max. But I have been thoroughly impressed with just how rich and how full this compact subwoofer is added to my truck. I mean, even when I crank the volume up and get, you know, over the 50% mark, I'm hearing minimal distortion. It's just very punchy, very rich. and really just fills in the low end of my truck's audio system. And guys, there's no hissing sounds. You know, sometimes with these aftermarket subwoofers, you get a constant hiss when there's no bass playing, and I don't hear that at all with the Pioneer. It's just completely quiet and silent when there's no bass notes. There's no engine noise, no static or anything else unpleasant. It's just, you know, nice, rich, deep bass. Then as far as the remote goes, I chose to stow it away under this center jump seat. Right here, you can see it's kind of mounted on its side. They do give you a piece of adhesive Velcro, so you can mount it really wherever you want. But yeah, I've got mine on its side right here. You can see the blue light is on because I have the truck in the accessory mode currently, and so the radio is on. And then when the truck shuts off, that blue light goes off, and in turn the amp goes off. But the controls are really basic right here. I mean, typically for me, the first week or so driving around, I was playing with everything and, you know, getting it set just right. But since then, I've pretty much left everything set here. So the top one is going to be the overall gain. Again, this is on its side, but I've got mine set to about, 10, 11 o'clock right here. So, I mean, look at all the extra bandwidth I could go if I wanted to. And really for me, right about 10, 11 o'clock is just right. Then below that is the knob for the frequency cutoff, and it goes from 50 to 125 Hertz. And so I've got mine set to about 3 o'clock. Again, it's on its side right here. So that's probably about 100 Hertz. So basically it's sending all the frequencies, all the sounds from 100 and below to the subwoofer. And then everything above that, it's just cutting it out. And that helps with distortion, you know, so you're not sending too much to the sub at once. Then below that, it's got a phase, a normal, and a reverse. And then it's got a digital EQ button right there. And I've just kept mine on the normal. I've played around a little bit with the deep and the dynamic, but really normal seems about right to me. So again, basically once I set everything, I pretty much just left this in here, haven't touched it since. And it sounds really good. I mean, basically, as I'm adjusting the volume on my factory system, as I'm listening to music and turning that volume knob, it's sending more gain naturally to the subwoofer. So really, this is just if you're not getting the amount of bass you want, and you want to increase that or change the frequency, then you can go in and adjust all that on the remote. And so overall, I'm really impressed with this setup from Pioneer. I mean, really, when everything is said and done, to me, in my opinion, this setup right here sounds a lot more expensive than it really is. But again, if you're not a Pioneer fan, I will link below to other alternatives that I looked at. You can see right here between the passenger seat, you've really got about 13 inches. And so the Pioneer right here is 11 inches. So you do have a little bit more room for some of the larger subs. And I'll link to all those down below. But guys, I've been running this setup here now for about a month. I've had 0 issues. It's worked flawlessly. And really, I can't believe that I waited this long to perform this mod, because it really does take the factory sound system to a whole new level. And just to draw another comparison, I used to have a 2019 Silverado that had the Bose upgraded audio system with the subwoofer. And, you know, I would rate that audio system overall probably an 8 out of 10, with 10 being the best, you know, 1 being the worst. And before this subwoofer, just the base, you know, GM factory audio system here in my truck, I'd say it's probably about a 3 or a 4. But now adding in this Pioneer subwoofer, I would say it brings it pretty close to that Bose factory audio system, you know, a 7, maybe a close 8. And so I really think you're getting a lot of bang for your buck doing an upgrade like this. Now last, let me talk about one thing that I would do differently if I was installing this subwoofer, or really any other subwoofer in the truck all over again. What would I change? And this has to do with a recent experience that I had on my truck. I'm going to do a full video on it, but basically I got a left front turn signal error message on the cluster. I had to take the truck into the dealership to get that fixed. And like I said, I'll do a separate video detailing all of that. But after going through that experience, I started thinking more about, you know, aftermarket stuff like this subwoofer right here. And let's just say hypothetically that my 13.4 inch infotainment screen right here started flickering out of the blue, you know, completely out of the blue, just started flickering as I'm driving around. So I take it to the GM dealership and have them look at it, and then they discover, oh, you've got an aftermarket subwoofer installed, and we see where you T-tapped into the wires, and that's what caused the 13.4-inch infotainment system to start flickering. Even though it had nothing to do with the audio, coming out of the system, it's just kind of like low-hanging fruit, essentially, that they can blame for, OEM equipment on the truck. And so after going through that experience, that was just a hypothetical, by the way, I started thinking, during the install, I mentioned that you can buy a harness, kind of a breakout harness that taps into those audio connections and splits them apart so that you don't have to use T-taps, and that literally you could unplug the harness and then put everything back to factory. And I started thinking, really, if I did this all over again, at the time I was trying to save, that 70 bucks or so for that expensive harness and just do the T-taps. They work fine. But I thought, really, I probably would have just spent the 70 bucks, gotten that special harness, and that way, if I ever did have a problem with the infotainment system, I could easily just unplug it, before I take it to the dealership. And that way they can't, blame the failure on the aftermarket sub. So that is one thing I would do differently. Really, that's just something you've got to weigh and determine, what suits your particular situation best there, and really what level of risk, I guess, that you're willing to take on. Well, anyways, guys, I hope you found this video helpful. I gotta say, I am very pleased with how everything sounds, especially having only spent about $250 all in on this mod. I will include links down below to everything, including that special harness I just talked about, along with the Pioneer sub and the alternatives and all the other accessories that you saw featured in this video. A lot of those I already had from other projects, but I will put links to everything down below. And that way, if you need them, they're there. If you have any questions about this mod, definitely drop me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer them. As always, thanks for watching.